In this video, we're going to learn how to simplify fractions. This is also known as writing fractions in lowest terms. When you are simplifying a fraction, you are trying to make it so that the GCF of both the numerator and the denominator is 1. If your GCF of the numerator and denominator is already 1, then you don't have to simplify. Here are your rules to simplify a fraction. So step 1, find the GCF, the greatest common factor, of the numerator and denominator. Step 2, divide the numerator and denominator by the GCF. So let's look at some examples. The first fraction we're going to simplify is 6/24. So my rules to simplify say step 1, find the GCF, greatest common factor, of the numerator and denominator. So I'm going to set up my factor trees. If you need help with finding greatest common factor, there are several YouTube videos I've posted to help you find the greatest common factor. All right, so remember, I'm breaking these numbers down as far as I can. So factors of 6 would be 2 times 3. Going to circle the 2 and the 3 because I can't break them down anymore. The only other factor of 2 is 1, so 1 times 2 equals 2, and then 3 times 1 equals 3, so I circle it. Then I'm going to set up my list for 6. So 6 equals 1, because 1 is a factor of every number, times 2 times 3, 24. You can start with any factors that are multiplied together to equal 24. But I'm going to start with 2 times 12. I circle my 2, and then I need to keep breaking down my 12. 12 equals 2 times 6. I circle this 2. Then I break down my 6. 6 equals 2 times 3. I circle my 2 and I circle my 3. So my list for 24 equals 1 times, I'm going to go in order from least to greatest, 2 times 2 times 2 times 3. Now I go through and circle every pair I have. So I have to have the same number in both lists. So I have a pair of 1s, a pair of 2s, and then I also have a pair of 3s. These 2s I can just cross off because they do not have a match in the list for 6. So remember, you pull 1 out from each pair and multiply to find your GCF. So GCF equals 1 times 2 times 3. And now I can just multiply from left to right. GCF equals 1 times 2, which is 2. 2 times 3, which equals 6. So your GCF equals 6. Now that I found my GCF, step 2 says to divide the numerator and denominator by the GCF. So in order to write 6/24 in simplest form, now I need to divide my numerator, which is 6, and my denominator, which is 24, by 6. So 6/24, divide the numerator by 6, divide the denominator by 6. 6 divided by 6 equals 1. 24 divided by 6 equals 4. So 6/24 in simplest form equals 1/4. Let's try another one. Let's do 22/33. So remember, Step 1 says I find the GCF of the numerator and denominator. So I'm going to set up my factor trees for 22, my numerator, and 33, which is my denominator. So for 22, I can break this down into 2 times 11. And then I'm going to circle both of those numbers because that's as far down as I can break them apart. The only other factors of 11 is 1 times 11. Same thing with 2. It's just 1 times 2. So my list for 22 equals 1 times 2 times 11. And now I'm going to break down 33, which would give me 3 times 11. And again, I'm going to circle my 3 and circle my 11. So 33 equals 1 times 3 times 11. To find your GCF, you circle the pairs you have in common. So I have a pair of 1s, then I have a pair of 11s, and now I can make my list. So I pull out 1 from each pair, so GCF equals 1 times 11. So GCF equals 11. That's step 1. Now step 2 says I divide the numerator and denominator by the GCF. So now I take 22 over 33, and I divide 22 by 11, and then I divide 33 by 11. 22 divided by 11 equals 2. And 33 divided by 11 equals 3. So in simplest form, your answer is 2/3. Remember, these fractions are equivalent. This is just written in simplest form or lowest common terms. Now let's look at 7/14. We're going to write this in simplest form. Remember, step 1, find the GCF of the numerator and denominator. So I'm going to set my tree up for 7 and 14. Now for 7, my only factors of 7 are 1 and 7. So I'm going to circle both of those. So 7 equals 1 times 7. Now for 14, I can do 2 times 7. I circle my 2, and I circle my 7. So my only other factor of 7 is 1. So 14 equals 1 times 2 times 7. Now I can circle my pairs. I have a pair of 1s and a pair of 7s. So I pull 1 out from each pair. So GCF equals 1 times 7. So GCF equals 7. So that's step 1. Now step 2 says I divide the numerator and denominator by the GCF. So 7/14. I'm going to divide my numerator by 7 and my denominator by 7. 7 divided by 7 is 1. 14 divided by 7 is 2. So 7/14 in simplest form is 1/2.